Okay, great, everybody. Today, I want to have an interview with Dawn Augsten. She is a real estate investor and she built her own empire in her own right, especially in rentals. And I want to share some of the information because it comes from a little different perspective. A lot of the audience here is from the younger generation. And we want to show that it is possible, even if you're from the younger generation, to break into the business. And Dawn has a little different situation because she was in an upbringing in real estate, but then she decided she wanted to make it her own and she changed some ways to do business. And I think that's what really pushed her in a total new and amazing direction. So Dawn, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So let's start for a little bit from the beginning. You were born in a family of real estate. And so you saw a lot of the good and the bad from it. So you want to share a little bit about your upbringing in real estate?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in South Florida. My parents, they've been investing in the Florida market since the 80s. So I actually grew up like fully in the real estate business, in my opinion. As a kid, my older brothers and I worked in the family business. We were basically my parents' cheap labor. We painted, cleaned, we could, set toilets, fix ACs, lay tile, grout, and almost anything you name, we were a part of it or helping in some way, shape, or form. So I actually like to joke that I was born with a paintbrush in my hand. Not that I do a lot of painting now, but when I do paint, I'm like, wow, this humbles me and brings me back to my roots. So, and I didn't realize it at the time, but being able to get home from any of the rental properties that my parents had, wasn't something my other friends were doing, and it wasn't normal, especially when I was like really young. And I always knew like the different areas that we owned in. Like I'm like, oh, we're close to a rental property, and could point it out like if we drove by it. But yeah, and it also, I felt like it wasn't normal that I was being dropped off to the private school that I went to in one of those economy vans, like the big white, the ones you tell your kids to stay away from, in case they're going to get kidnapped. But I felt like it gave me a lot of character at a young age between doing the work and knowing how to do things that my friends didn't know how to do, and then also not letting like others judge you, right? Just because of what your outward appearance is. My friends were being dropped off in really nice cars, and then here I am in like, a work van. And at the time I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like just don't look, don't think about it, and like it built a lot of character that I didn't realize was happening at the time. So after high school, I went to UCF for college. I managed I went to school for property manage, or I went to school for business management with a minor in real estate. I actually didn't even major in real estate because I could have, because I didn't think it would be that big of a part of what I was doing. Seriously, I was just like, oh, this is fun. I'll just I already kind of know this. Let me minor in it. Like, no big deal. But I felt like college was actually where I got a lot more of my momentum in real estate. My parents, instead of putting me in dorms every year, they actually bought a house. And my roommates, they paid the mortgage. So I put my friends in the rooms and they paid the mortgage, and I was in charge. And so like as a college kid, I was like in charge of my peers, which was crazy. And it went so well that they found partners and they bought another house every year after that. So I went from managing one house to multiple houses in a few years, and felt like, property management, because of my upbringing, was just like second nature, right? So, and I was put in charge of fixing things when they broke. I cut the lawns, which was crazy when I was in college. And then I made sure that all the bedrooms stayed full, because if the bedrooms weren't full, then we weren't making, the max amount that we could on that house. And, the great thing about doing college rentals is when you rent by the room, is that basically you're bringing in more income than you normally would if you were just renting to a single family or something like that. So that was, these houses quickly became cash cows, which was really cool to witness. My senior year, we actually had another family decide that they wanted to invest in real estate. And so that was 2011, and Florida was like at rock bottom. And that summer, my portfolio of what I managed doubled. So at that point, I kind of decided like, okay, I actually need to like give this a solid chance and try it out. And little did I know that all the customer service and the handy woman knowledge that I learned would directly help me with the rentals, flips, and the short and midterm, rental business that we do now. How much it helped me along the way.
Right, and we're going to transition. We're going to talk a little about, because you are also building up an Airbnb portfolio that, like you said, the experience that you had with doing this type of boarding houses in college actually help you to see the possibilities with Airbnb and short-term rentals. So we're going to talk about here kind of like what is the common denominator between the two. There are some things that are, like you say, you're bringing in a lot more rent than you will bring as a regular rental, right? Long-term rental. So, and like you said, you went to college, you didn't think real estate was going to be a big part of your life. But then what happened then, beside the management experience you had in college, what happened after college that made you transition into, say, in real estate, and more importantly, kind of detach from your parents' way of doing business into your own?
Yeah, so once I graduated, I came home and I tried to do what I was told my entire life, which was to take over the family business, a property management. And I'd like to say that it went well, but it really didn't. I found myself doing all the same tasks that I was doing when I was growing up and working really hard. And I have nothing against working really hard, right? Like I was raised to do that. But at some point, you have to start working smart. So my brother and I actually decided to get some outside help. We went to one of those 3-day seminars, and I signed up for a program that like I call my master's in real estate now. And I liked all the information I was learning because it was completely different from what I was taught growing up. So I was eager, to help my parents transform their business, with this new knowledge. And I attempted to change their business, but unfortunately, I'm always going to be their little girl, and I think it was really hard for them to take me seriously with the changes that we were trying to implement, which makes sense because they had been doing business at that point for 30 plus years the same way, and it was really difficult to get them to change. So I actually had this awesome opportunity to intern at a bigger company that I felt like was just further along than my parents' business was. Like it wasn't, it was well beyond like a mom and pop and had many more doors. So I was like, okay, I have to be able to learn something from this and bring it back and help my parents. And it was in Indianapolis. I actually think you know him, Aaron Adams.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and worked. I interned for Aaron Adams in Indy for a month, and then he actually offered me a position, and I only lasted 3 months because I felt like a piece of me was dying every day, which sounds awful, but it was like my first real like 8 to 5 experience. Like before that, I did the property management on my own terms. I worked for my parents. I babysat, I did, oddball things, but nothing was like ever like a set, like this is, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And it really had nothing to do with the company that I was working for, or the job that I was doing, or anything like that. I had really just figured out that I was building someone else's empire, and it didn't align with like where I wanted to go. So that constant nag every day, made me realize that I needed to do something about it, and that I wanted to build my own empire, and that real estate, because it's what I knew the best, was the perfect way for me to do it. So a friend actually recommended Greenville, South Carolina, and I did my own research on it, and that was it. I moved there after after I, put in my 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. And it makes me, a takeaway from this is that you learn from different people. But like what Tony Robbins say, if you want to be successful in whatever business you want to do, he says, follow somebody who has done in their footsteps and then make it your own and build your own success. So, you are kind of done the same thing. You learned obviously growing up with your parents, then you went to work in Indiana, then you say, okay, I got enough now knowledge. But, and you have the true entrepreneur spirit, meaning that, you see the opportunities, you learn from it, and then you build your own business the way you want it. So, and then you went to Greenville, and then you started getting into rentals and so forth. Now, I want to talk a little bit about then, the transition into working with your parents and working with Aaron to building your business. Okay.
Yeah.
How did you take that leap? I mean, how did you say, okay, I'm strong enough to be on my own? Because for some people, like me personally, it took me about 8 years, to go from working with other people, a little less maybe, but to really feel like total confident that I could be on my own and do things my own way. So how did you do that transition?
Yeah. I
What
think it
was
was,
the catalyst?
there was a combination of things that happened. One, I had a mentor, which I felt like was really important. I think Aaron asking me to work for him was also a big catalyst for me, because at that point, like, it's not that he was like, hey, I want you to work for me. He was like, hey, I want you on my team. He's like, you're a go-getter. Like, you're the exactly like what I'm looking for in a team player. And having someone tell me that, and seeing like what he was doing also helped me see like, oh, I can do this. And so I feel like working for him sped that up. And then the other thing was things at home with the business, when I tried to bring some of these changes back, wasn't going well. And I had to make a really big choice at that point to choose family over business. And so that to me was like, okay, well, if you're going to choose business, then you're going to do your own business, right? And those, I feel like it was like a combination of those things that made me be like, okay, this is it. And I was just fortunate enough that, my husband, who I was just dating at the time, we weren't even married yet, him and some of his colleagues were, they had savings saved up. So it helped the momentum of growing in this new market at a faster pace. And so with the funding available and that confidence now that I felt like I was lacking before about what I was doing, really those things like all kicked in at once. And it not to say it wasn't scary, right? Like, I'm 20 something years old and dealing with other people's money and making decisions for the first time that I've never had to make on my own. Of course, like, I got to be a part of decision making in the past, or at least witness, right? Like, I got to help all of the houses that we picked in Orlando. I was a part of the viewing and like my opinion and things like that. But it at the end of the day, like, I didn't make the final decision. In Greenville, like, that was it. And my husband wasn't even around, right? Because he was working out of the States. And so I had to go view and make those decisions on my own. And I just think because I had already looked at so many properties over the years, that when I went in and looked, like, I knew instantly, okay, this is us, or no, this is, move on.
Right.
So I think that was really helpful. Just that whole background of just being around, if you've never looked at a property and all of a sudden you're looking at 50, you're just like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed, right? But if you've been looking at property your entire life, when you go to look at a property, you're like, yes, this is it. That, I can fix this, or I can change this, and I know it'll make it better, or, oh no, like, it takes far too much work, to make this what I want it to be in order for it to be what we need. So I think it was an accumulation of what happened with my family, and choosing family over business, and, working for Aaron, and then, just having the funding available to really jump into a new market.
Right. Yeah. It's like the perfect storm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned something that I see here as a common thread with some of the other interviews around your age that have built a sizable rental portfolio, is that they used other people's money, right? So
Yes.
that was one of the big things, that going from doing a couple of properties here and there to doing packages of deals, or one of them, she does commercial 10 to 50 unit apartments buildings. So if you want to transition then, and I would like to give a little bit of a tips here, recommendation, transitioning then from being quote unquote a small time real estate investor to being somebody like you that does investments on a higher level with rentals, and I know you bought some commercial and so forth. One of the catalysts is using other people's money. So do you want to give a little bit of tips on some of the things that you believe brought your business to another level?
I think that having a good base knowledge of the construction aspect, and being able to bring players into our team, because my expectations were really clear, right? So when I worked for Aaron in Indy, one of my things was I was going to the job sites and checking, the progress, as well as when projects were done. And so, like, a scope of work with very clear expectations, I think, makes a really big deal. And it also helps you look at, let's say, many different contractors and say, okay, when you hand off a scope and you're getting numbers back, you're comparing apples to apples, right? Whereas if you do a walkthrough and they write down whatever and you think one thing, like, it's not really, you don't know if everything is covered, right, in the numbers that you're getting. So I felt like having the base knowledge of construction, setting clear expectations when I was, picking and making my, we'll say, team, right, the people we work with in South Carolina. And then, just communicating with the people who invested with us along the way, I think, was really helpful, right? Especially because they were not versed in real estate or anything that we were doing. So, it was kind of like an education process in the way, but it's fine because, when you're educating them on what you're doing and keeping them in the loop, I feel like people really appreciate that, as opposed to just being in the dark and being like, okay, project's done. But there are some investors that want that, right? And then there are other people that are like, hey, I just want to know where we're at. Like, are we 50% done, in the renovation? Or are we like 90? And, what expectations? Because I think people, it's all about managing expectations. So I think that's also a really big thing that helped us Catalyst, right? Because all it takes is one person that you're working with that they're happy working with you, and then word of mouth trickles down, and then as someone else that has money, in the savings, they're like, oh, hey, I have this money set aside, like, can we work with you? And that's what's happened with us, with the investors that we work with, is they hear about what we're doing, they hear that we're successful, and then they're like, hey, obviously I don't know about real estate, but I would love to put my money to work, right? And we're happy to do that. So I think just communicating, being, a man or woman of your word is really important too. Like, if you say, hey, I'm going to give you an update on this day, then do the update on it. Hey, if you're going to get the money back on that day, then, and if not, then you just need to communicate. So I think it's important. Those things I feel like have helped us build at a rapid pace in South Carolina.
Full transparency is crucial, right? And I tell people my own experience, 2001, when I started working with private money, and then 2007 happened. I didn't have a lot of the issues that other investors had, just because I was very transparent throughout the career with them. And so 6-7 years later, when that happened, it was just a matter of telling them, giving them an option to communicate. And so there was no big, lawsuit. I know our investors had to file bankruptcy, lawsuits, and stuff like that. And I didn't have any of that, just because of the full transparency all along. So yeah, that's crucial in a business like real estate, definitely. Okay, so if you could give some tips and recommendations for especially newer investors, women that are looking to transition, because let's face it, it's still a men's business a lot, right? There are certain things world that are still a men's business. And women are look a little bit of a prejudice when it comes to being, a real estate boss or, somebody of your level. So you want to give some tips of women looking into breaking into real estate and how they can really vest themselves for that role of being a business leader in the real estate?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I've actually been able to see this firsthand. At one point, my husband actually came into South Carolina and wanted to oversee some of the projects. And because he hadn't done that yet, I was like, yeah, let's bring you in. I want to see how you do, because my husband has no background in real estate either. And so some of the things that I noticed that my contractors complained to me after, was that he failed to listen, right? Like, so if something came up, they would propose ideas, and because he was like already coming up with his own solution, he wasn't listening to what they were saying. So I think being educated as much as possible is helpful. So then you understand a base of what, when people bring you issues that you have to face, that you already are understanding it as much as possible, and then to not be scared to be educated, right? And to really listen, right? So when issues come up, and if it's something I'm not versed in or haven't dealt with, I always ask for opinions and say, okay, like, what do you suggest we do? What are our options? Like, what's, and I don't always go with, we'll say, the best and highest option. I go with what makes sense for the situation for us and the contractor that I'm working with. And I think that the people that work with me understand and know that I'm reasonable, right? And I think that's something that can really set aside like women doing this is just being reasonable and understanding the full as much as possible when making a decision, and then also trying to have clear expectations. I know that a lot of the contractors that work with me or the subs, they like working for me because I'm very decisive, right? So, when they bring up something that comes up, like I make a decision very quickly, or like I set what the expectations are for the job, like upfront. There's no, it's not like, oh, I wanted this, but I changed my mind. It's, I put that thought in ahead of time. So that way, when some of these things come up, that's it, right? And they know that. So they're not, having to either change things out like a million times, or that, oh, is she going to change her mind this time? Or I'm not saying you can't change your mind, but for the most part, you want to be able to make a decision and try and stick with it. And just being educated as possible, or learning in the process, so that way you understand what's going on, and that way it's just easier to navigate with who you're working with. And some of this stuff I've even had to deal with long distance, right? Because I'm usually in South Florida and I just visit the South Carolina market now. But because I've already built these connections, they already know what to expect from me, right? When issues come up, it's not like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to get from her, right? I try to be as consistent as possible. So those are the things I would have for tips, is just to try and be educated when you come in. And if you're not, to ask questions. And so I feel like the people you work with appreciate that you're willing to learn and work with them, right? And to be reasonable.
Right. Okay. So just to wrap things up then, what are you into now? What are you doing nowadays? And now I know you have a lot of things going on. You have long-term rental, you have short-term rentals. I also know you have some commercial properties. So would you like to share what you're working on, and what are your immediate future, outlook on what you're going to do?
Yeah, so we have a few projects going on in Greenville right now. We spent the last year basically building out our short and midterm company business. We added 10 more listings to our portfolio. And then also I had some listings that I started like 3 or 4 years ago. And so we came back around and we spent a good chunk of the year revamping those spaces. So, so it's a better experience for our guests, and that we're not leaving money on the table, essentially, right? Like we're able to ask the higher prices based on our space and what it looks like and how it feels and just the experience that our guests are having. So, and then I'm wrapping up that Airbnb and short and midterm class, right? That I'm getting ready to launch here at the beginning of this next year. So I'm really excited about that because I feel like I've really poured my heart and soul into it and tried to think of, you know, all of the different things, little or, you know, big, when it comes to the process of acquiring and actually starting listings, and, you know, how to be successful in each of those steps, so you're not having to go back and be like, oh, well, we should have done it this way, right? Like I want to take that learning curve out, you know, for my students, since I have that experience over the past 6 or 7 years of doing this. And then I actually have a really big renovation on the horizon. I'm helping my family with that beach house that you're familiar with. So that project we should be breaking ground on that, hopefully in the next month or two.
Great. Yeah, no, definitely. And then the sky's the limit, right? It seems like you're really just starting to build, although you already have a sizable portfolio, but you're really starting to build up your business. So that's amazing. Great. Well, thanks for sharing all this info with me. Like I said, I like to bring, you know, the younger generation real estate investors to see what is shaping them to be a real estate investor, because a lot of our women are on the verge like you, and they say what is going to take them to the next step, to the next level. And so thanks for sharing that with me. And I'm sure we'll be following you and see how you do. And like you said, you're going to be launching here a program on Airbnb and short-term rentals. And I know a lot of the students have also got a lot of benefit from you already. So I'm excited to bring it out to the larger audience.
Thanks, Laura. No, I appreciate you having me, and I love the space that you hold for me to make a difference and to grow and impact other women. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.